Hello and welcome, my name is Interjection and this is game number 1 in the H2O versus Owata series. They're playing a best of 5 for PK Clan tournament number 4, and yes, I am halfway through casting the SNES Jack versus Koenig Eric games, and I haven't forgotten about those. I will finish those, and in fact I have actually made the next video for release, which I would have put up not yesterday but the night before, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But I just wanted to mention that here we see both blue and red rushing their war chiefs to the center of the map here to build that middle trading post. Looks like red got there first. Perhaps his explorer spawned closer to this trading post, or perhaps he was more on the ball and sent it there sooner. But either way, they both want that, since of course usually, not always, usually you do get this trading post up before that Travelers man will pass, and it means it will grant you a hefty chunk of experience points, 130 to 140. Boom, 130 XP there. Almost got his first shipment here. If we click on this flag, he'll select his deck any moment now and then send his first shipment, which will be 3 settlers, since of course those generate a staggering amount of resources over the course of the game. And he's going to get them sooner than blue, meaning that his economy will be off to a nicer start, and that he'll probably be able to click up a little bit sooner, since of course he will have a bit more food than his opponent. We'll switch over to H2O. And here's blue. Looks like he might not even get that experience at all. Of course, this does have to go up, this trading post. It should be okay. There it is. So it's going to be okay. He will get the experience points just a little bit later than the other player. But yes, H2O versus Owata. And before we jump into this game, as I was saying, I have finished the SNES Jack versus Koenig Eric game number 3, and I would have uploaded it last night, not the last night, the night before, but I wanted to put it on the official Age of Empires YouTube channel. So I spoke to the Microsoft community Age of Empires team people, and they said that was fine. They were happy for me to do that, so I uploaded it to SkyDrive, where they will then download it, and then they will re-upload it to their channel, and I'm quite happy to do that. So I'll link you guys to that video once it goes live. But in this game, I suppose I ought to introduce the players. In the north of the map here, we have H2O in blue playing as the Iroquois, and H2O, definitely one of these old pros who have come back to this game to compete for the cash prize of $1,800. Possibly one of the best players that this game has ever seen, possibly the best, though we can't ignore the fact that people like I Am Grunt and Parfait have played this game, but those people have not signed up for this tournament, and therefore I am not interested in them. I'm not going to put them in the spotlight. But he is up against Owata, who is also a very strong player, I believe, from the Japanese community, and he is a worthy opponent. We'll see how this goes. And over here, there's a bit of conflict over a 140 food treasure here. Of course, food, a very influential treasure indeed early on, since it helps you get up to the next stage a little bit more quickly, and it means you can be that bit more competitive. And here we see red converting the Guardian, trying to go in and snipe it from him, but both players putting their explorers down at roughly the same moment. H2O got the treasure. Blue got the treasure. 140 food. He's going to be clicking up to the next stage a little bit quicker here. And red, of course, I think he could have got that if he converted that Guardian there. Of course, he converted this Outlaw Rifleman at the last moment to try and well, all the Guardians would be then gone, and he'll be able to claim the treasure. Okay, so here we see blue going into hand combat against that Outlaw Rifleman there. Of course, it resists 30% of range damage, but therefore 0% of melee damage, so it's actually more efficient to do melee damage against it. But as I was saying, I think red definitely could have got that, but here, he has just clicked up to the Colonial Age, went through the Messenger, who of course grants you no bonus upon aging up, but instead gets you there very, very quickly, and H2O doing the same, I believe, due to the speed of his age up. And here, the Iroquois get a free Travelers man each and every time they hit up to the next age, and it looks like he's bringing this forward. He wants to place the Travelers here, of course turn it into a war hut. Very aggressive play, very forward war hut, and he's also brought his Explorer, his War Chief, up here, because it has a lot of HP, a decent amount of damage, and he can siege down that war hut there whilst it is being constructed. Of course, he knew that there would be a war hut going up somewhere, and that he'll be able to siege it down with his Explorer. His first Colonial Age shipment is 4 Kanya Horsemen, and we'll switch over to H2O and see what he is up to. Also sending 4 Kanya Horsemen as his first home city shipment, so both players here looking to be aggressive and looking to raid, looking to kill some settlers with these cavalry, and of course these cavalry will be useful in that first fight as well. The only difference in builds so far is that H2O has put up a market during transition to the Colonial Age and gotten that Hunting Dogs upgrade, which gives you a nice 10% bonus bonus to food gather rates, whereas red has not put up a market. So we'll see how that pans out for them early or later on. But here, looks like that perhaps the blue war chief there used his crack shot on these Kanya. And also those outlaw riflemen were doing some damage. And that's quite significant, since all of these cavalry now have a few hit points worth of damage, whereas all of Blue's units do not have any damage on them at all. And that could be quite influential in that first fight, where, of course, Blue will have more overall hit points than his opponents. Anyway, we see Blue going for, I believe, look, sending 7 Aina as his second colonial age shipment, and also training Aina here. We'll switch over to Owata and see what he's doing. This is why I find mirror matches so interesting, because the changes in build and stuff. And here we see him going for Tomahawks, which is, you know, different. His first shipment here, 6 Tomahawks, and also training Tomahawks. So I'm going to be very interested to see how this pans out, since, of course, H2O's unit's very weak to cavalry, and the only form of anti-cavalry that he has is the cavalry of his own. He doesn't have any anti-cavalry. So the red cavalry here, though they are damaged, are going to be very difficult for him to deal with if they start to attack his units. He's going to have to focus them down, otherwise those red cavalry will just make a mess of his army. But then on the other hand, the Aina here, they're very strong against the Tomahawk, so providing he can kill those cavalry, his Aina will do very well against these Tomahawks here. And it looks like those cavalry have been focused down. There's just one left there, and now once they are down, he will be in a very good position to fight this. Here we see the 6 Aina shipment arriving. Of course, we'll switch over to H2O, and his second shipment here, 6 Aina, just arrived at the war hut, meaning he now has a larger mass than Red, and Red can no longer fight this until he has more units. We'll switch over to Owata, and here we see the 7 Aina shipment, of course, his third colonial age shipment on the way, which is confusing me, because he got his trading post up sooner, so I'd expect his shipments to be arriving soon. Let me just check the treasure history. H2 has discovered an unusual black-footed ferret. Okay, that explains it, worth 210 XP. So H2 actually found an XP treasure, meaning that his shipments are going to arrive slightly sooner here. But now we see Owata popping his 7 Aina shipment and 5 Ainas that he trained at the war hut at the same time, meaning that he has now reclaimed that military advantage. And I think that Blue is going to have to retreat here. He's going to have to walk back. He can't fight that, since he's going to be outnumbered and he'll lose too many of his units. But he's still fighting it. Perhaps he'll leave in a moment. But yes, both players in this game, what are we going to expect? They're going to be sending just straight up military shipments, because if one player does not and the other player does, then they're going to have an early military lead, and then with that lead they can just push in to the war hut, bring it down, and then of course just push into their base and harass the settlers. So they're going to have to send military shipments all the way. And then what I find especially interesting is once they've sent all of these shipments, of course, 4 Kanya, 6 Tomahawk, 7 Aina, and 6 Aina, we'll switch over to H2O. Here we see these 6 Tomahawk just arriving now, and with that he's pushing out, going to start sieging down this war hut. But after, all of these military shipments have arrived, it'll be interesting to see the build that they do. And here, of course, Blue now has the advantage, since he has his units, and Red is still waiting on his shipment. But once that shipment arrives, then it's going to be very even again. Here we see, over his last military shipment, 6 Aina. And now that they've arrived, pushing him back. So very back and forth. Both these war huts have taken damage. We take a look at the score. 68 to both of them. Of course, in Age of Empires 3, 1 point on the score is the equivalent of 100 resources on the battlefield. And it is just a mirror matchup. It is just going to be very even. And it is all about micro, of course. You're going to be clicking on all of the units, looking for the weak ones so that you can use an appropriate amount of units to bring that down. And, you know, if a unit has 1 HP left, you're not going to use your entire army just to click it down, because that's just a waste of units and, you know, just not a good idea generally. But H2O about to receive that next shipment, and I am kind of intrigued to see what he will choose. Sending 600 wood, okay, so he had a few options open to him. Of course, 5 settlers is an option. The military is fairly even, so with those 5 settlers you could then start to boom, and then perhaps take an early military, well, certainly an early economic lead, which would then, of course, transform into resources, and then you could train units and perhaps push out. His other option, I guess he could send a unit upgrade and then push out, though that's probably better to do later on, and he's instead chosen to send 600 wood, which is, in my opinion, continuing this all-in aggression, because with that wood, it means he will not have to collect any wood with his settlers, meaning that they are free to make use of that hunting dogs upgrade, which he has got, and collect nothing but food to continue this Aina spam from here, and that wood he can therefore use to continue building longhouses and support population. But with that wood, he can also put up a corral, which is a Iroquois stable, and then start training remaining cavalry. Of course, Iroquois cavalry cost 100 food and 75 wood, so that wood there going to help him produce more military units, and then he can perhaps outmass his opponent. We'll switch over to Owata and see what he's doing. He has sent 5 settlers, so he's actually going down that boomy route, and I'm going to be interested to see how this works out. Of course, H2O, with the 600 wood, going to get an earlier military lead, with which he could then use to his advantage and push Red. But Red, if left long enough and can defend well, these 5 settlers here are going to be able to collect enough resources and then perhaps give him the next early lead. So you see, no players really wanting to push yet, and they're just just on the peripherals, just walking around, really not doing a lot. And that's because they both know that there's a better time to push. We switch to H2O, and he's not going to push, of course, waiting for that. Okay, he has put up a corral. He's not going to push until those units are trained, at least. And then with those, he'd have a nice advantage, and that would be the time to push out. But we switch to Owata, and he's sent 5 settlers, so the time to push out is not now. His settlers are still generating resources. We've put up he's put up a market here to get a nice economically, to obviously get those upgrades and continue the economically. But the idea here is he wants to stay in his base and boom. And perhaps his next shipment, we'll see what it is, but then, later on in the game, he might send something like conservative tactics or the infantry hit points here. Of course, that increases hit points by 15% for his infantry. Makes a lot of sense, infantry hit points. Conservative tactics increases attack and hit points for various units. I'll hover over it here so you can see. And then, once that arrives, then it's a nice time to push out, because, of course, those settlers would have been alive for a while and generating resources, and then he can use that shipment to upgrade his units anyway. We'll switch over to H2O. Okay, so 5 settlers is his next one, and then, has these cavalry here. Perhaps he's looking to do some raiding. And then now he's coming in to push out, of course. Those settlers going to be behind in his base, backing him up, making resources in the back, whilst he now has this early military lead. We'll switch over to, you see 34 settlers here for H2O, now the 5 has arrived. Owata, of course, sent them earlier and has 33. So perhaps here, H2O actually has a little bit, slightly better macro, perhaps, since he does have 2 settlers more. And that is kind of significant because, of course, each settler, they'll generate 100 food over 2 minutes, and that is the equivalent to an hyena. They cost exactly 100 food. Anyway, I'll talk about the civilizations in play here, both Iroquois, and that is because at this kind of level, both of these players highly competitive, and they both want to win that cash prize and go further in this tournament. Here we see Blue coming in to kill a settler, and that macro and also some raiding definitely going to help him out. Not pushing in yet, though. We see Owata sending conservative tactics. Perhaps he'll push out once that arrives. But both players playing Iroquois, since Iroquois is considered to be a lot stronger than some of the other civilizations, at least by some people. And for that reason, they've both chosen it, since it is a strong civilization. Of course, whoever wins this game will not be allowed to play Iroquois in their next game, as per the tournament rules. You can read the tournament rules at pkclan.net. Anyway, I suspect that both players will be looking to push out fairly soon, and of course there can be a lot of debate over when the best time to push out exactly is, but usually it is once a military shipment arrives, or perhaps a shipment generally, or once a batch of units has just been created, such as 5 Kanya horsemen, though there are only 3 there, or perhaps once your Minutemen have arrived. And here, perhaps the fight is going to get going, but then again, perhaps not. They have been passive for quite a long time, and this fight here is a big one. It kind of determines the game, since the entire game really has been leading up to it. Here we see the cavalry coming forward. Both players only have a few cavalry, and of course those are the units which are, once they are near the other player's units, they're going to be taking shots. So if they're getting close, if you're going to retreat, you've taken a few shots and you've kind of wasted. So here, going all in with them, bringing down the cavalry, and those, then we can move on to the hyena, and those are the units which are good against the hyena here. We see mostly hyena from both players, and that is because hyena cost almost exclusively, well, they do cost exclusively food, nothing but food, 100 food, and food is the fastest gathering resource. That is why we see so many hyena, and that is why Iroquois is considered to be so strong, because they have a unit that costs nothing but the fastest gathering resource, and hyena are by no means a weak unit. It's all about micro here, of course, finding the weak units and making sure you kill those first, and then using an appropriate amount of units to kill them as well. Here we see 4 Kanyas from Red coming in, and those are going to be a big deal. Those are going to get a lot of kills for him. Of course, they are very strong against hyena, and hyena do not do very good damage against cavalry. So here, being able to even up the gap a little bit We see 5 Kanya from H2O coming in, and this isn't so good for Owata. Just a very similar story. Those cavalry, of course, going to bring these Aina down. Really does not look good for him at all. He might even lose his War Chief, and that is a big deal since, of course, the Iroquois War Chief, you'll notice both players have been trying to keep alive this entire game, and that's because your War Chief increases your hit points of all of your units. Here we do not see any kind of circles around the base of the red units here, where we do for blue, and that is because the Iroquois War Chief is still alive, and he's increasing these units' HP. 139 hit points on these blue Aina, but only 137 on the red ones, though I do believe that that is down to the fact that Owata actually has, yes, infantry hit points as well. He has both infantry hit points as a card and conservative tactics, whereas red only had one of them. As you can see, infantry hit points on the way, he only has conservative tactics active. So, yes, there was like a 2 HP difference, something like that, but blue had more, though he only had 1 card active. I hope you can see where I'm going with this. But that fight concludes the game almost, since it is just down to it. Like, it has been leading up to that, and I guess there are a few reasons as to why the fight ended out and played out the way that it did, and it could be down to unit micro, of course, the way you use your units and making sure you use them efficiently, but it could be macro, of course, where one player might manage their economy or have more settlers and be more consistent at making settlers and therefore have more resources. It could be any host of things. I mean, we saw that H2O sent 600 wood and the Owata didn't. Perhaps having that wood was able to give him a nice early lead in military units, which of course had that effect in this fight. Though it is pretty conclusive that that is the end of the fight, and both of these players have a few more games to play. This is the first game in the best of 5, so by no means a loss overall. And certainly H2O will not be allowed to play Iroquois in his next game since he won this game. So hopefully you'll join me for the next fight. My name has been Interjection, and I will see you next time.